Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc Podcast with hosts Waldo Wachewski and Ophelia Brewski.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are back.
Back again.
With another deep dive. And this time,
oh yeah,
this is a juicy one.
Always is.
It always is. I'm telling you, this Luv Doc Column this week, oh my goodness.
Dora's box.
It really is. So we're going to dig into that today, talk about some of the issues that it brings up for all of us.
Yeah, because, it seems simple on the surface, right? This week's question, but wow, does it go deeper?
It does. It does. So the basic situation is this, right? We've got a reader who's asking the Luv Doc whether or not she should share her location with her new boyfriend.
New boyfriend, important detail.
New boyfriend, very important detail. And on the surface, you might think, okay, well, what's the big deal? People share locations all the time. But
right. You say new boyfriend, and immediately I'm thinking, okay, what's the backstory here?
Exactly. There's got to be more to it. And there is. She mentions that she had a previous relationship where an ex really misused that location tracking feature.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. It sounds like a pretty bad situation. Mm-hmm. Like using it to keep tabs on her, to control her movements even.
So now she's understandably cautious. Can you blame her?
No. Not at all. I mean, who wants to feel like they're being watched and monitored all the time?
Right.
Especially by someone they're supposed to trust.
It cuts to the heart of privacy and autonomy in a relationship, right? You have to feel safe and in control of your own information.
Exactly. And this is where it gets kind of interesting because the new boyfriend doesn't exactly come across smelling like roses.
Oh, how so?
Well, she mentions that he basically tries to downplay her concerns, Kind of implies that she's being overly sensitive because of what happened with her ex.
Trying to personalize her trauma. Not cool.
That's exactly how the Luv Doc puts it. And I think they hit the nail on the head with that one because it's the subtle form of manipulation.
Right, for sure. Whether it's conscious or not, he's trying to undermine her feelings and her boundaries.
Yeah, and this is where I think the Luv Doc really draws a line in the sand.
Yeah, they don't mince words.
Yeah. Never mince words. They basically come right out and say, look, no means no. Just because we have the technology to track each other's every move doesn't give anyone the right to do it.
It's about consent, plain and simple. And respecting each other's boundaries, which is fundamental in any healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And that got me thinking about, how this whole situation can really erode trust in a relationship.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how can you truly relax and be yourself when you feel like you're constantly being watched or judged or questioned about your whereabouts?
Exactly. And then it's like, where do you draw the line? I mean, is it only bad if they're actively using the location data to show up unannounced, or is it...
Right. Or is it the very act of having access to that information, even if they're not actively using it?
It's like a digital leash almost. And the Luv Doc actually uses this kind of shocking analogy to drive home this point.
Okay, the John Bobbitt comparison. Had to address that one, right?
Oh, we have to go there. Buckle up, everybody.
Classic Luv Doc, though. Shocking, thought-provoking, and you're never going to forget it.
Never going to forget it. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a very extreme example, but it does make you stop and think.
It does, because it highlights how easily something can go from seeming harmless to being used in a way that's controlling or even harmful.
Exactly. And I think that's the scary part when we're talking about technology in relationships.
And it's not just location tracking, it's all of it, right? Social media, text messages, browsing history. We're sharing so much of ourselves online.
And it's like that information can be used in ways that we never even imagined sometimes.
And faster than we can set norms around it.
Exactly. Technology is developing so rapidly, and it's like our social and ethical guidelines are always trying to catch up, which I think is something the Luv Doc is really trying to get us to think about with this whole deep dive.
For sure. And it's not just about romantic relationships either. It's friendships, it's family, it's even our professional lives.
Right. It's like, how much access are we giving to our employers, to businesses, to the government, even with all this technology?
It's a lot to unpack, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. And I think this column really just scratches the surface. But, leave it to the Luv Doc to take something that seems so simple and turn it into this.
Philosophical exploration of technology and relationships in the digital age.
I was going to say, existential crisis for all of us.
Well, a little bit of both.
So how about we dive into some of the specifics that the Luv Doc brings up, because they go on to talk about some really interesting stuff about drones. And...
Oh, yeah, the drone analogy. Hold on to your hats, everybody. Yeah, so the Luv Doc brings up drones, like the ones that deliver packages and all that.
Drones. Okay, I have to admit, when I first read that part, I was like, where is this going?
Right, it seems like a bit of a leap, but then they tie it back in a way that you kind of have to give it to them.
Right, because at first glance... it does seem a little out there, but then the more you think about it.
You see where they're going with it. So they're talking about how drones are this technology that a lot of people, I mean, maybe not a lot of people, but some people were kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool, delivering packages. But it's like,
what could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong? Exactly. And now look at the conversations around drones. We're talking surveillance. We're talking military applications.
Exactly. It's that whole double-edged sword thing with technology, right?
Totally. And the Luv Doc's point is that we might be seeing a similar thing play out with some of these technologies that are becoming commonplace in a relationship.
So, like, it's not just about whether or not you're comfortable with your boyfriend tracking your location.
It's about the bigger picture. Like, what happens when that kind of tracking becomes so normalized that we don't even question it anymore?
Right. Or even just expect it. Like, imagine if it got to the point where it's like, if you really loved me, you'd share your location with me 24/7.
Exactly. And it might start subtly, right? Like, oh, just let me know when you get to the restaurant so I don't worry. But those small things can build up over time.
Until you feel like you're constantly being monitored and judged. Which, I mean, even if the person isn't actively using the data to control you, just knowing that they have access to it can be damaging to a relationship, right?
Absolutely, because it creates this power imbalance and erodes trust, which, let's face it, are kind of essential ingredients in a healthy relationship.
Right. Like, you can't really relax and be yourself if you feel like you're always walking on eggshells.
And that's where those red flags that we were talking about earlier come in, right? Because if someone is constantly trying to downplay your concerns or make you feel bad for wanting to set boundaries.
Especially when those boundaries are about something as personal as your location data.
Exactly. That's a huge red flag. And it's not just about technology either. It's a pattern of behavior.
Right. It's about control. And honestly, I think that's what this week's column really got to me. Because it's like the Luv Doc is taking this really specific problem that this one reader has, but then they're connecting it to these much bigger issues
about power, about privacy, about how technology is changing the way we relate to each other on a fundamental level.
Exactly. And not always for the better.
Right. And not always in ways that we fully understand yet. I mean, we're kind of in uncharted territory here, right? Like, who could have predicted even 10 years ago that we'd be having these kinds of conversations?
Seriously, it's like we're building the plane as we're flying it.
And hoping we don't crash and burn in the process.
Okay, so that got a little dark. But you're right, it's a lot to process. Yeah. And I do think there's a sense of, I don't know if it's hopelessness, but definitely a feeling of urgency that comes through in the Luv Doc's response this week.
For sure. But I wouldn't say it's entirely doom and gloom.
No.
No, I think there's also a sense of, I guess, empowerment. Like, the Luv Doc is reminding us that we do have a choice in all of this.
So, like, what can we actually do? I mean, it feels like this huge, overwhelming problem.
Well, the Luv Doc, they always keep it real, and they basically say, look, you can't control what everyone else is doing, but you can control yourself.
Okay, so start with the personal responsibility angle. I like it.
Right. Like, be mindful of the information that you are sharing. Be careful about who you're sharing it with.
Easier said than done sometimes, especially when you're caught up in, like, the excitement of a new relationship or...
Absolutely. Or even just like the convenience factor, right? It's so easy to just click accept on all those terms and conditions without really reading them.
Oh my gosh. Guilty as charged. Who actually scrolls through all that?
Right. But we have to start being more aware because those little decisions, they add up over time.
They do. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, but with data instead of paper.
Exactly. And the Luv Doc even compares our current situation to, like, the Wild West of the internet back in the day.
Oh, you mean like before we knew any better and just blasted our personal information all over the place?
Exactly. Like, remember when people thought it was totally fine to put their social security number on a postcard and mail it in?
Okay. To be fair, I wasn't alive back then.
Yeah, point taken. But you see what I mean? We've come a long way in terms of online security and privacy. But we still have a long way to go when it comes to these newer technologies, especially in the context of relationships.
Okay, so we got to be more careful about what we share online. What else? I mean, the Luv Doc has to have more wisdom for us.
Right, because this isn't just about individual responsibility. It's about creating those larger societal shifts.
Like what? Changing the laws around data privacy.
That's part of it, for sure. But it's also about having those sometimes uncomfortable conversations with our friends, our families, even our kids.
Oh, so it's like a trickle-up approach.
Kind of, yeah. Because if we can start normalizing those conversations about boundaries and consent in our everyday lives, then that can start to influence the bigger picture as well.
Right. It's like we can't just rely on lawmakers to figure it all out for us. We have to be actively involved in shaping the kind of future that we want to see, which is, I'm not going to lie, kind of a daunting thought.
It is. But it's also empowering, right? Because it means that we're not powerless in all of this. We have a voice, and we can use it to advocate for change.
I love that. So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the Luv Doc would probably say it starts with those small, everyday actions.
Like maybe actually reading those terms and conditions for once.
Exactly. Or having that conversation with your partner about what you're both comfortable sharing online.
Or maybe thinking twice before you hit share location just because your friend asked where you are.
Right. It's about being intentional with our choices, even when it comes to technology.
And remembering that our digital lives are still real lives with real consequences.
Absolutely. And that those consequences can impact not just ourselves, but the people around us.
Wow. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground today.
We did. From location tracking to drones to the Wild West of the internet. It's been a wild ride.
Only the Luv Doc could take us on a journey like that.
And that's why we love them.
That's why we love them. Always thought-provoking, always entertaining, and always leaving us with more questions than answers.
The sign of a good deep dive.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there, what are your thoughts on this week's topic? Have you had any experiences, good or bad, with location tracking or other technologies in your relationships?
We want to hear from you.
Hit us up on social media, send us an email, whatever works for you. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay mindful of those digital footprints.
See you next time.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Luv Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?